Welcome to Fabricadabra's Embroidery Edition. Today we're going to be working the chain stitch as well as two of its variations, the detached chain stitch and the twisted chain stitch. First, we're going to start with the detached chain stitch, which is also known as the lazy daisy stitch. So we're going to use these little dots as our guide of where we're going to put our stitches. You're going to come up through the back just as you always do, and you're going to pull the floss through until the knot at the end hits the back of your fabric. And then as you can see, I'm holding the thread down with my thumb, and I'm pushing my needle back down through the exact same hole I came up through, or close enough to it. And I'm going to pull that through until I've created a bit of a loop. Okay, and then I'm going to decide which way I want the rounded part of this stitch to go, because it kind of looks like a petal. And then I'm going to push my embroidery needle up through the back of the fabric at that point, and I'm going to pull it through, and then I'm going to weave it through the loop and then pull it until I've created a little petal shape, which I'm going to get a little closer so you can see, but that wasn't the greatest look. And then I'm going to hold my thread down again, and I'm going to go on the opposite side, the outside of that end of that loop, and I'm going to do a tiny little stitch to keep that loop in place, to keep that little petal shape in place. And sometimes it pulls a little bit too tight, and so you can adjust that with the tip of your needle. And there we go. That's our first detached chain. I'm going to come back up through another point, go back down through the same hole, create a little loop, decide which direction I want it to go in, push my needle up through the fabric at that point, and then pull it through until there's another little petal or chain shape. Then to tack it down, I'm going to put a tiny little stitch onto the outside of the rounded end of my petal or chain stitch. And I'm sorry for the camera work on this. I didn't realize I was out of frame when I made it, and there's not much I can do about it now. So basically, I'm doing one final one. You can make these chains or petals as big or small as you'd like. So I'm making a slightly larger one just so that you can see it. I find that the smaller shapes look a little bit nicer, but the larger shapes can also look nice. And there you go. Those were the detached chains. Next up, we're going to do the regular chain stitch, and we're going to do that starting from the left to the right, and we're going to do that along a straight line, although you can do it along a curved line. So you just come up through the back like I'm doing here, and instead of going forward a stitch length, you're going to actually put your needle back down through that same hole, just like we did with the detached chain. Okay, and we're going to leave a little loop, and then we're going to go over one stitch length from the back and push our needle back up through, and then you can put it through the loop and pull it until you've created your little chain or petal, if you want to call it a petal instead. Okay, now instead of doing that little tiny stitch that tacks it down, we don't need to do this here because it's going to be a stitch that keeps going. So we'll only have to do that little tack down at the end when we're finished with the stitching. So now we're going to go back down through that same hole we came up through, and we're going to pull until we've created another loop. And then we're going to go over a stitch length and come up through the back, and then push the needle through the loop. And so right there we have 2 links of chain to our chain stitch. And that's it a little bit closer so you can see it in a little bit of detail. Okay, so again, back down through that same hole you just came up through. Pull it until you have a loop. Then go over a stitch length from the back and come up through your fabric. And just like with the back stitch and our stem stitch and a number of our other stitches, if you're going along a curved line, so if you were doing something in a circle, you would just make your stitches that smaller so that you can have a nice smooth edge to your curve. But since we're going along a straight line, we can have a larger chains, basically a longer stitch length. And I'm just going to keep working that until I get to the end. Okay, so I've decided I'm going to end it a little short of the line. So that was my final link in my chain, and now I'm going to go just on the outside of it and make that tiny little tack down stitch to tack that last link down in the chain. And then I'm just going to use the tip of my needle to kind of bell the chain out a little bit to make it pretty. And that's the chain stitch. Next up, we're going to do the twisted chain. Now this one's a little bit more difficult, a little bit more complicated. So we're actually going to work this one from the right to the left. Come up through the back. Okay. And then we're going to kind of come in through the side at a slant, and we're going to catch a little bit of the fabric on both sides. So we're going to go down a little bit over the line and then come up a little bit under the line. So we've caught a little bit of fabric in between. And we're going to make that loop, and we're going to put our thread through that loop and pull it tight, and that creates a little knot. Okay, so that's the first twisted link in our twisted chain, and then we're going to keep going from there. So we're going to come in at a slant, catch a little bit of the fabric there at the line. Oops. Okay, try that again. We don't want to catch too much fabric. And then I'm going to take that. It's a loop, but I'm kind of looping just the floss itself around that needle. And then you're going to pull that through. And it creates a little twist to your chain. I called it a knot, but it's really more of a knot. It's like a twisted knot. So again, come in from the side at an angle. Catch a little bit of the fabric. Take your floss and put it around and underneath your needle, and then pull the floss through. And here we are again, catching a little of the fabric. We're going to put the floss around and underneath our needle and then pull the floss through. And again, creating another little twisted chain link. And that's it a little bit closer so you can get a better look at it. And now I'm going to speed it up here so that you can see me do a few more stitches. And then I will cut to the end so you can see the finished line. here's my finished twisted chain stitch. It's a little bit uneven. I would have preferred if I had kept it a little bit neater, but it's still very nice looking. Thanks for watching and happy sewing!